We took our principles, we fought for our principles, we put them on paper, we passed them in a law, and now we're seeing the fruits of that labor. And the blue wave, as they say it, they want to take it all away. We're not going to let that happen, are we?
If that blue wave does in fact happen during this year's midterms, much more than those GOP principles may be at stake. Donald Trump's very future as president could be at risk should a new Democratic-controlled Congress decide that impeachment is on the table. Back with me, Karine Jean-Pierre, and joining me now, Zerlina Maxwell, Director of Progressive Programming at SiriusXM, Jill Wine-Banks, former Assistant Watergate Special Prosecutor, and Jason Johnson, Politics Editor at The Root. Thank you all for being here. And Zerlina, I'm obsessed with this issue of committees, and I know it's not the sexiest thing in the world. We're going to make it sexy, right? Because the reality is that people say, I love Elijah Cummings. But I don't hear the Democrats saying, well, if you love him, wouldn't you like him to go from being ranking member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee to the chairman, the guy with the gavel? If you look at financial services, everybody loves Auntie Maxine. Love Auntie Maxine. Do you know that Auntie Maxine, Maxine Waters, is the ranking member on financial services, meaning she would inherit the gavel. She'd be the chair, and the Intelligence Committee. This one is very important. Adam Schiff. Everyone loves the fact that he's holding Donald Trump's feet to the fire, but he has no subpoena power. Wouldn't you like him to have subpoena power? If you are a Democrat that wants accountability, shouldn't Democrats care more about these committee chairs?
Absolutely, and I think that we need to get away from this notion that we're going to impeach and remove the president, because it's a two-step process that's nearly impossible. In order to impeach the president, you need 218 votes in the House to say yes to articles of impeachment. Then that goes over to the Senate, where you need 67 votes to remove the president of the United States. So that's basically an impossible feat that may never happen unless Republicans do a 180 and decide that they want to hold this president accountable for any reason. So yes, we need to stop talking about the I word, and we need to start talking about the O word, which is oversight, and Congress stepping in, using their subpoena power to look into Jared Kushner's corruption, potentially, to look into what Donald Trump is doing in terms of using his hotels and profiting off of the presidency. There are a lot of areas where Congress can step in and conduct their constitutional duty of oversight. So we should stop talking about impeachment and start talking about that.
You know, and this is why we wanted to have Jill Wine-Banks in this conversation, even though she's not a political prognosticator. But it was very important to have you here, Jill, because let's just look at this for one moment. So Democrats, in order to get congressional majorities, they would need to get 23 net seats in the House, which would put them barely over. It wouldn't give them necessarily a majority big enough to impeach Donald Trump. In the Senate, they would need 2 seats, which would give them literally just 51 seats. They would not have the 67 votes needed to impeach. So people need to understand that that is a big, high hurdle. But you served in an era when there were some Republicans who were willing, even though it was a Democratic majority Senate and House, they were willing to cross over to give Democrats that supermajority that would have been necessary to impeach Richard Nixon. But I want you to listen to the current Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. I'll read it to you. And Paul Ryan was asked about what could happen if, in fact, Donald Trump were to lose control of his party, lose control of the House. He said the president is strong in these states. He's an asset. Well, there's no, oh no, that's not the one I wanted. Basically, Paul Ryan said that, here it is, it's number 4. Should Republicans lose control of either the House or the Senate, you'll have gridlock. You'll have subpoenas, he said. He says the system would shut down. What he basically meant was you'd have oversight. So if the current speaker is saying, I won't do oversight, we won't do oversight, the only way you get oversight is if you get Democrats. Is that a system that you recognize, having worked on the Nixon impeachment?
It's not just Nixon and impeachment or indictment. It is oversight, and there was bipartisanship in the Nixon administration. Yes, the Democrats had the majority, but they worked together, and it was the Republicans who actually went to the president, walked into the Oval Office and said, you will be convicted in the Senate. You have no support among Republicans anymore. We've seen the evidence, and you have to resign or you will be convicted on the articles of impeachment that have already passed. So there was a time in our history when Democrats and Republicans met, talked, compromised, negotiated, and got things done. And it's time for us to return to that. I cannot even possibly imagine how we are going to go forward if we don't have that. But I agree with your last speaker that oversight would be a terrific thing to have, and that a lot could be accomplished without impeachment.
And you know, Jason, I've been saying the word depressing a lot today, ever since a post-Roe wedding coverage. It's all downhill from there. Because the idea that oversight is a purely partisan exercise, right? That when the president is a Democrat, it's 11 Benghazi hearings, 11 separate hearings on Benghazi. It's the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee constantly dragging members of the Obama administration before them for things that they are saying are scandals. But as soon as the Republican gets there, oversight's not something they do. And then when you flip it, you have Nancy Pelosi responding, she's now the House Minority Leader, saying, yeah, we would do oversight if we were to get control of the House. No, duh, we would do that. But she also is saying that impeachment is too toxic, that it would be a gift to Republicans, to talk about it, but that oversight is something she's saying we would do. What kind of a point have we reached when the only way to get oversight is to have the other party in charge?
Well, it's basically a point where people don't believe in right and wrong, and they only care about power. You know, it's one of the reasons that, like, Americans tend to like mayors. Mayors are like, there's not a Republican or a Democratic way to fix a pothole. You just fix it. You know, if you are using your private businesses and using the government to enrich yourself, you should probably be held accountable, whether you're Scott Pruitt or the President of the United States. But the Republicans have decided that oversight is only something they can use to go after Democrats. And I will say this, and I think this is important to understand. When Pelosi is saying, I don't necessarily think that, being a jerk is enough to go after the president has been basically blowing his nose on the emoluments clause since he got into office.
Yep.
He's been engaging in plenty of behavior that will be absolutely impeachable. But I will say this, just for the safety and health and well-being of America, I don't want to see President Donald Trump impeached. I think that would be dangerous. I don't want that man out in the streets. I want to see him repudiated at the voting box, because that way we can shut down not only what he represents, but everything he has to say.
And that is that is one reason, Karine, that people will say impeachment's a bad idea, that it would just sort of remove him from responsibility, right? But the second one is a purely political argument. This is Nancy Pelosi saying that impeachment, just talking about it, is a gift to Republicans.
Impeachment is a very serious matter. It is, if it happens, it has to be a bipartisan initiative. I don't think that we have the information to go to that place, and I discourage any discussion of impeachment. On a political side, I think it's a gift to the Republicans to talk about impeachment.
And Karine, to that point, Max Boot has argued in the Washington Post that if Democrats win the House and initiate impeachment, many strategists believe it could backfire because Trump will paint the whole process as an attempt to undo the will of the voters. The Senate is unlikely to convict. Trump could emerge.
And you know what? It's a good point, because what Trump is thinking about is 2020. He's thinking about his reelection. And there is a case to be made that if the Democrats take over the House and they do the oversight and they lead to the I word, that he's going to use that. And we know when it comes to message control on that, he's actually very good at that, because he's talking to his base that is not going to go anywhere, but he wants them to be energized and excited going into 2020. And that's where the political harm can potentially be, is him using that for his reelection for 2020. And I could see that, him thinking that in his head, right? It's like, this is going to be my message. That's going to be the boogeyman, because he likes to have a boogeyman, and that's what he's going to be using.
But for a lot of Democrats, Trump is the boogeyman. And impeachment exactly is energizing for Democrats.
Right. It is. I think that it's not that we can't talk about impeachment. It's not about like avoiding discussing the things that Donald Trump is doing, like Jason said, in the emoluments clause being a really good example of a potentially impeachable offense. But Gerald Ford said famously, an impeachable offense is anything the majority of the House says it is at any point in history. And so essentially in this moment, that is what's going to happen. Donald Trump is doing plenty of things that could be considered an impeachable offense because it's in a very amorphous definition. But I think that Democrats need to focus on energizing the base by saying they are going to hold this president accountable and laying out a plan for how they're going to do that. How are they going to conduct oversight, and on what issues? And I think that that's a much more effective and winning message for Democrats in 2018.
Absolutely. And we are out of time, but non sequitur, Jason Johnson, give us a preview of what's going to happen in Georgia on Tuesday in that governor's race.
I think it's going to be a
Democratic
very
primary.
tight race, but it looks to me like Stacey Abrams is probably going to pull it off.
Yeah.
So we could have the potential for a first black woman governor of Georgia. If you don't think voting matters, ask Alabama.
And progressive,
a progressive black woman. So 2 Stacey's running. Everybody in Georgia get out and vote. This could really be historic. Karine Jean-Pierre, Zerlina Maxwell, Jill Wine-Banks, Jason Johnson. We're going to have you guys all come back. We'll just dish about the royal wedding. And still to come, we'll tell you how Jared Kushner's latest crack at peace in the Middle East is going. That's next.